The old wagon creaked down the dusty road, its wooden wheels fighting against every rock and hole. Jack Miller held the reins with hands that shook from more than just the cold morning air. Behind him, three small faces peered out from under a torn blanket. His daughter Lucy, only 8 years old, kept her arms wrapped tight around her two younger brothers. Tommy was 6 and little Ben had just turned 4 last month. Jack's throat felt dry as sand. They had been traveling for 3 days now, and their water was almost gone. The children hadn't complained much, but he could see the hunger in their eyes. Lucy tried to be brave, just like her mother used to be. The thought of his wife made Jack's chest tight with pain. The sickness had taken her just 2 months ago. First, the crops failed because of no rain for months. Then Mary got sick with fever. Without money for a doctor, Jack could only watch as she got weaker each day. After she died, the bankmen came. They took the farm, the house, everything. All Jack had left was this old wagon, one tired horse, and his 3 children. Now they were riding toward a ranch he had heard about in the last town. People said a woman owned it. They said she was tough but fair. Jack didn't know if it was true, but he was running out of choices. The children needed food. They needed a roof over their heads. Winter was coming, and sleeping under the stars would not keep them alive much longer. The sun was getting higher when Jack saw it. A big wooden sign that read Sunset Ranch hung between 2 tall posts. His heart started beating faster. This was it. This was their last chance. The ranch house was bigger than Jack expected. It was painted white, but some of the paint was old and peeling. There were several other buildings scattered around. He could see cattle in the distance and horses in a fenced area near the barn. Smoke came from the chimney of the main house. Jack stopped the wagon near the front porch. He told the children to wait while he got down. His legs felt weak, but he made himself walk to the door. Before he could knock, it opened. A woman stood there looking at him. She was maybe 40 years old, with gray streaks in her brown hair. Her clothes were simple but clean. Her face was serious, and her blue eyes seemed to look right through him. "This had to be the owner, ma'am," Jack said, taking off his old hat. "My name is Jack Miller. I was wondering if I could have a word with you." The woman looked past him at the wagon where the 3 children sat watching. "I'm Mrs. Helen Carter. What do you need?" Jack's mouth felt even drier now. He had practiced what to say, but now the words seemed stuck. "Ma'am, I know you don't know me from anyone, but I'm in a bad way. I lost my farm, lost my wife too. I got 3 young ones, and winter's coming." Mrs. Carter's face didn't change. She kept looking at him, waiting. Jack took a deep breath. "I heard you might need help around here." "I'm a good worker, ma'am. I know cattle, I know farming, I can fix things. I don't need much money. Just a place for my children to sleep, and some food to keep them alive." His voice started to shake. "Let me work your land, ma'am. Only promise to guard my little ones." For a long moment, Mrs. Carter said nothing. Jack could hear his heart beating. In his ears, behind him, little Ben started to cry softly. Lucy was probably trying to quiet him down. Finally, Mrs. Carter stepped out onto the porch. She walked past Jack toward the wagon. Jack followed, not sure what she was doing. "Children," she said in a voice that was firm but not mean. "What are your names?" Lucy spoke first. "I'm Lucy, ma'am." "This is Tommy, and that's Ben." "How old are you, Lucy?" "8, ma'am. Tommy's 6, and Ben just turned 4. Mrs. Carter nodded. She looked at each child carefully. Jack could see she was thinking hard about something. "When did you last eat?" she asked. "Yesterday morning," Lucy said quietly. Mrs. Carter's face softened just a little. She turned back to Jack. "You say you can work?" "Yes, ma'am. I can do anything you need. I worked my own farm for 12 years before the drought got it. I know animals, I know crops, I know how to fix buildings." "And you're willing to work just for food and shelter?" "Yes, ma'am. That's all I need. Just keep my children safe." Mrs. Carter was quiet again. Jack felt like his whole life was hanging on what she would say next. "There's a small cabin behind the barn," she said finally. "It's not much, but it's got a roof and a fireplace. You can stay there. I'll expect you to work from sunrise to sunset. In return, you'll get meals and a place to live." Jack felt his knees almost give out with relief. "Thank you, ma'am. You won't regret this, I promise." "We'll see," Mrs. Carter said. "Bring your wagon around back. I'll show you where you'll be staying." As Jack climbed back onto the wagon, Lucy grabbed his arm. "Papa, are we going to live here?" "4. Now, sweetheart, for now." The cabin was small and dusty, but it had 2 rooms and a good fireplace. There were even some old beds inside. Mrs. Carter showed them where the well was and pointed out the outhouse. "Breakfast is at dawn," she told Jack. "I'll expect you in the barn right after. We've got a lot of work to catch up on." That night, Jack tucked his children into the old beds. They were the first real beds they had slept in since leaving their farm. Little Ben was already asleep. Tommy was almost there too. Lucy looked up at Jack with big, serious eyes. "Papa, do you think we can stay here?" Jack smoothed her hair back from her face. "I don't know, honey, but I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure we can. I miss Mama," Lucy whispered. "I know, sweetheart. I miss her too." Outside, the wind was picking up. Jack could hear cattle in the distance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight his children were warm and safe. For the first time in months, Jack felt a tiny bit of hope that Mrs. Carter had given them. A chance. Now he had to prove they deserved it. He had to show her that taking in him and his children was the right thing to do. The future of his family depended on it. As Jack finally fell asleep on the old chair by the fireplace, he whispered a prayer of thanks. They had found shelter just in time. Now the real work would begin. The rooster crowed just as the sun started to peek over the hills. Jack was already awake. He had barely slept, his mind racing with worry about the day ahead. This was his chance to prove himself. He couldn't mess it up. He quietly got dressed and stepped outside. The morning air was cold and sharp. He could see his breath in little clouds. Mrs. Carter was already at the barn, carrying a bucket of feed for the horses. "Good morning, ma'am," Jack said, hurrying over to her. She looked him up and down. "You're on time, that's good. Take this feed to the horses in the far pen. After that, we need to check the cattle in the south pasture. Some of the fence posts are loose." Jack took the bucket and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The work was hard, but Jack didn't mind. It felt good to use his hands again, to feel useful. The fence posts were worse than Mrs. Carter had said. Some were barely standing. Jack spent the morning digging new holes and setting new posts. His back ached, but he didn't stop. Around noon, Mrs. Carter brought him a cup of water and a piece of bread. "How's it going?" "About half done, ma'am. I should have it finished by evening." She nodded and walked away without saying more. Jack couldn't tell if she was pleased or not. Her face always seemed serious. Back at the cabin, the children were trying to make the best of things. Lucy had found an old broom and was sweeping the floors. Tommy was outside stacking firewood he had found scattered around. Little Ben was playing with some rocks he had collected. "Papa!" Ben ran to him when Jack came back for lunch. "Look what I found." He held up a shiny rock. "That's real nice, son," Jack said, picking up the boy. "You finding lots of treasures?" "Lots and lots." Lucy had made a simple meal from the supplies Mrs. Carter had given them. Just bread and some beans, but it was warm and filling. Jack was proud of how his daughter was taking care of her brothers. "Are you working hard, Papa?" Tommy asked. "Very hard. And it's important that you children help too. We want Mrs. Carter to see that we're good people to have around." After lunch, Jack went back to work on the fence. The afternoon sun was hot and sweat dripped down his face. His hands were getting blisters, but he kept going. As he worked, he noticed Mrs. Carter watching him from time to time. She would appear near the fence line, check on something, then disappear again. By evening, Jack had finished the fence repair. He was exhausted but proud of the work. The fence was straight and strong. It would keep the cattle where they belonged. Mrs. Carter came to inspect it just as the sun was setting. She walked along the fence line, pushing on posts and checking the wire. Jack waited nervously for her to say something. "Good work," she said finally. "This should hold for years." Jack felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, ma'am. Tomorrow we need to move the cattle to the east pasture. Can you ride?" "Yes, ma'am." Been writing since I was younger than Tommy. The next few days followed the same pattern. Jack worked from dawn to dusk while the children helped however they could. Lucy swept and cleaned around the cabin. Tommy helped gather eggs from the chickens and feed the barn cats. Ben mostly just tried to stay out of trouble, but his cheerful chatter seemed to brighten everyone's day. Slowly, Jack began to understand how the ranch worked. Mrs. Carter ran it mostly by herself with just one other hand, an older man named Pete who came a few days a week. The ranch wasn't huge, but it had good land and about 200 head of cattle. Mrs. Carter was a hard worker. Jack often saw her up before dawn, checking on animals or mending something that had broken. She never asked Jack to do anything she wouldn't do herself. He respected that about her. One morning, Jack was fixing a broken gate when he heard voices from the house. Mrs. Carter was talking to someone on the front porch. Jack couldn't hear the words, but the voice sounded angry. When he looked up, he saw a man in a fancy suit and hat. The man was pointing and waving his arms around. Mrs. Carter stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head. After the man left, Mrs. Carter seemed upset. She worked harder than usual that day, her jaw set tight. Jack wanted to ask what was wrong, but he didn't think it was his place. That evening, while Jack was putting tools away in the barn, Mrs. Carter came in. "Miller," she said, "how are you and the children settling in?" "Real good, ma'am. The children seem happy, and I'm grateful for the work." She nodded, then seemed to be thinking about something. "Your daughter Lucy is smart. I've seen her reading." "That old book she found?" "Yes, ma'am. Her mother taught her to read before she passed. Lucy's always loved books. There's a whole room of books in the house. Most of them are just sitting there collecting dust. She's welcome to borrow them if she wants." Jack felt a warmth in his chest. "That's very kind of you, ma'am." "She would." "Love that." Double quotes. Mrs. Carter turned to go, then stopped. The boys seemed to have a way with the animals, too. Tommy especially. The horses like him. He's always been good with animals. Even when he was tiny, dogs and cats would come right to him. "Useful skill on a ranch," she said, then walked away. As the weeks passed, Jack could see small changes in Mrs. Carter. She still worked hard and rarely smiled, but sometimes he caught her watching the children with a softer expression. Little Ben had a way of making people smile without even trying. His giggle was infectious, and even Mrs. Carter couldn't help but crack a smile when he chased the chickens around the yard. Lucy had indeed found a library in the house. Mrs. Carter had shown her where it was, and told her she could read any book she wanted. Lucy was careful with the books, treating them like treasures. She would sit by the fireplace in the evenings, reading aloud to her brothers. Tommy had become the unofficial helper with the animals. He had a gentle touch and seemed to understand what they needed. Even the most stubborn horse would calm down when Tommy was around. Jack worked harder than he had ever worked in his life. He repaired buildings, mended fences, helped with the cattle, and took care of a dozen other tasks around the ranch. His hands were rough and calloused, his back ached every night, but he had never felt more determined. Every morning when he woke up, Jack reminded himself how lucky they were. Mrs. Carter could have turned them away. Instead, she had given them a chance. Now it was up to him to prove they belonged here. One evening, as Jack tucked his children into bed, Lucy grabbed his hand. "Papa, I like it here. Do you think Mrs. Carter likes us?" Jack thought about the question. Mrs. Carter was hard to read, but he had noticed small things. She always made sure there was enough food for the children. She had given Lucy access to the books. She had even found some old toys in the attic for Ben to play with. "I think she does, honey. But we need to keep showing her that we're worth keeping around." "We will, Papa. We all will." As Jack blew out the candle, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, real hope that maybe, just maybe, they had found more than just a place to work. Maybe they had found a home. 3 weeks had passed since the Miller family arrived at Sunset Ranch. The morning routine had become natural now. Jack would rise before dawn, work until dark, and fall into bed exhausted but satisfied. The children had found their own rhythms. Lucy had become fascinated with the library. Every evening after helping with dinner, she would disappear into the big house with Mrs. Carter's permission. The room was filled with books from floor to ceiling. There were stories about far away places, books about animals, and even some that taught about stars and science. "Mrs. Carter," Lucy said one evening as she carefully placed a book back on the shelf, "have you read all of these?" Mrs. Carter was mending a shirt by the fireplace. She looked up and smiled slightly. "Most of them. My late husband loved books. He said a person could travel the whole world just by reading." "I wish I could travel," Lucy said dreamily. "I'd like to see the ocean. Maybe someday you will," Mrs. Carter said. "But for now, you can visit it in those books." Lucy pulled another book from the shelf. This one had pictures of ships and whales. She opened it carefully and began to read about sailors and storms. Mrs. Carter watched her for a moment, remembering when she was young and full of dreams. Meanwhile, Tommy was discovering his gift with animals. Every morning, he would help Jack feed the horses. The animals seemed to sense his gentle nature. Even the most nervous horses would calm down when Tommy was near. "Watch this, Papa," Tommy said one morning. He slowly approached a young horse that usually shied away from people. Tommy held out his hand, speaking in a soft voice. "Easy there, boy. Nobody's going to hurt you." The horse snorted and stamped his feet, but he didn't run away. Tommy kept talking, moving closer inch by inch. Finally, the horse let Tommy touch his nose. "Well, I'll be," Jack said, amazed. "How did you do that?" "I just talk to them like they're people," Tommy said simply. "Animals understand more than grown-ups think they do." Jack had noticed this about his son before, but it seemed even stronger now. Maybe being around so many animals was bringing out Tommy's natural talent. Little Ben was having his own adventures. At 4 years old, everything was exciting to him. He had made friends with the barn cats and spent hours following them around. He had names for all of them, even though they looked almost identical. "That's Whiskers," Ben told Mrs. Carter one afternoon, pointing to an orange cat. "And that's Boots, and that's Fluffy." "How can you tell them apart?" Mrs. Carter asked. "Easy. Whiskers has a little scar on his ear, Boots has white paws, and Fluffy has the longest tail." Mrs. Carter looked more carefully and realized Ben was right. She had never noticed the small differences before. Ben had also discovered the joy of collecting things. His pockets were always full of interesting rocks, feathers, bottle caps, and other treasures he found around the ranch. He would show his collection to anyone who would look. One evening, Ben approached Mrs. Carter with his latest find. "Look what I got," he said, holding up a perfectly round white stone. "That's very nice, Ben," Mrs. Carter said. "It's magic, Ben announced seriously. "Magic? How do you know?" "Because when I hold it, I feel happy, and when you feel happy, that's magic." Mrs. Carter stared at the little boy. When had she last felt truly happy? She couldn't remember. But watching Ben's excitement over a simple stone did make her smile. As the days grew shorter and cooler, the children settled into life on the ranch like they had always belonged there. Lucy helped with cooking and cleaning, using skills her mother had taught her. She was careful and responsible, often acting older than her 8 years. Tommy worked alongside his father more and more. He was too small for the heavy work, but he could help with feeding, grooming the horses, and gathering eggs. The chickens especially seemed to like him. They would follow him around the yard like he was their leader. Ben brought joy wherever he went. His laughter echoed through the ranch house and barns. Even the ranch hands who came to help with seasonal work would smile when they saw him running around with his pockets full of treasures. Mrs. Carter found herself looking forward to the children's chatter during meals. The house had been quiet for so long after her husband died 3 years ago. She had forgotten how alive a house could feel with children in it. One rainy afternoon, when outdoor work was impossible, Mrs. Carter found all 3 children in the library. Lucy was reading to her brothers from a book about cowboys and horses. Tommy was looking at pictures of different horse breeds. Ben was coloring in an old book with crayons Mrs. Carter had found in a drawer. "Would you like me to teach you more about reading?" Mrs. Carter asked Tommy. Tommy looked up hopefully. "Could you?" "Lucy tries to teach me, but she's not as good at explaining as a grown-up." So Mrs. Carter began spending time each evening helping Tommy with his letters. He was eager to learn and pick things up quickly. Soon he was reading simple stories on his own. Ben was still too young for formal lessons, but he loved listening to the stories. He would sit perfectly still, his eyes wide with wonder. As Lucy or Mrs. Carter read about adventures in faraway places, Jack noticed the changes in his children. They seemed happier and more confident than they had been since their mother died. Lucy's smile came more easily now. Tommy walked with his shoulders straighter. Ben's laughter was more frequent, but Jack also noticed changes in Mrs. Carter. She was still serious and hardworking, but there was something softer about her now. She would pause to listen when Ben told her about his day. She would ask Lucy what she was reading. She would compliment Tommy when he did well with the animals. One evening, Jack was walking past the house when he heard piano music. He stopped and listened. Someone was playing a gentle, pretty song. He had never heard a piano in the house before. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Carter at an old piano in the corner of the living room. Lucy was sitting beside her on the bench, and the boys were on the floor nearby. Mrs. Carter was teaching Lucy to play. "Press this key with your finger," Mrs. Carter was saying. "Now this one. Good, you're getting it." Lucy hit a wrong note and giggled. "That sounded funny." "That's okay," Mrs. Carter said. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning. Try again." Jack watched his daughter's face light up as she successfully played a simple melody. He had never seen her so excited about anything since her mother died. The next morning, Lucy could barely contain her enthusiasm. "Papa, Mrs. Carter is going to teach me to play piano. She says if I practice every day, I might be able to play real songs soon." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Jack said, feeling grateful once again for Mrs. Carter's kindness. As October turned to November, the ranch felt more and more like home. The children had routines and responsibilities. They knew every corner of the property. They had favorite spots to play and favorite animals to visit. Mrs. Carter had stopped thinking of them as temporary guests. They were part of the ranch now, part of her daily life. She looked forward to Ben's morning hugs, Lucy's questions about books, and Tommy's updates on the animals. Jack could see it all happening, and it filled his heart with warmth. His children were healing from the pain of losing their mother and their home. They were building new memories and finding new dreams, but Jack also worried. This happiness felt fragile, like it could disappear at any moment. Mrs. Carter had been kind to them, but she had never said they could stay forever. What if she decided she didn't need them anymore? What if someone offered her more money for the work Jack was doing? For now, though, Jack pushed those worries aside. His children were safe, fed, and happy. They had books to read, animals to care for, and a warm place to sleep. For a man who had lost everything just a few months ago, that felt like a miracle. Every night, as he listened to his children's peaceful breathing, Jack whispered a prayer of thanks. They had found more than just work and shelter. They had found a place where they could grow and learn and be themselves. Whether it lasted or not, these were precious days, and Jack was determined to treasure every one of them. Winter arrived early that year, bringing with it challenges nobody had expected. The first heavy snow fell in late November, covering the ranch in a thick white blanket. What looked beautiful from the house windows quickly became a serious problem. Jack woke up to find the water pipes frozen solid. When he turned the handle at the kitchen sink, nothing came out but a few drops of ice. This was bad news. Without water, the animals would suffer, and the family couldn't cook or clean. "Mrs. Carter," Jack called as he knocked on the main house door. "We've got a problem." She came outside wrapped in a thick coat, her breath making white clouds in the freezing air. Together they walked around the property checking all the water sources. Nearly every pipe was frozen. "We'll have to break the ice on the pond for the cattle," Mrs. Carter said, "and melt snow for drinking water until we can get the pipes working again." It was backbreaking work. Jack spent hours chopping through thick ice on the pond so the cattle could drink. The ice formed again so quickly that he had to break it several times each day. Meanwhile, Mrs. Carter and the children hauled buckets of snow into the house to melt on the stove. My hands are so cold, Lucy complained as she carried in another bucket. Mine too, said Tommy. But the animals need water more than we need warm hands. Even little Ben helped, carrying small containers of snow and trying to stay cheerful despite the cold. The work was exhausting, but worse problems were coming. A week into the cold snap, Jack noticed some of the cattle looking sick. They weren't eating much, and several were coughing. Looks like pneumonia, Mrs. Carter said grimly when Jack told her. It happens sometimes in winter, especially when they get stressed from the cold and lack of good water. They moved the sick cattle into the barn where it was warmer, but more animals got sick each day. Jack and Mrs. Carter took turns checking on them around the clock. They gave the cattle medicine when they could, but mostly they just tried to keep them warm and comfortable. Jack was running on very little sleep. His eyes were red and tired, but he wouldn't stop working. These animals were Mrs. Carter's livelihood. If they died, the ranch would be in serious trouble. Papa, you look terrible, Lucy said one morning when Jack stumbled into the cabin after being up all night with sick cattle. I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired. But he wasn't fine. The stress and lack of sleep were wearing him down. He was making small mistakes, forgetting things, moving slower than usual. One morning, disaster struck in a new way. Little Ben woke up, burning with fever. His face was red and hot, and he was coughing badly. Ben! Lucy shook her father awake. Something's wrong with Ben. Jack shot up from his chair where he had fallen asleep. One look at his youngest son told him this was serious. Ben's breathing was fast and shallow, and his eyes looked glassy. Mrs. Carter heard the commotion and came running from the main house. She took one look at Ben and her face went pale. We need to get his fever down, she said. Lucy, get me some cool water and clean rags. Tommy, help me move him closer to the fire so we can watch him better. For the next 2 days, Jack and Mrs. Carter barely left Ben's side. They took turns putting cool claws on his forehead, giving him small sips of water, and watching over him. Lucy and Tommy helped however they could, but mostly they just worried. Ben's fever climbed higher. Sometimes he would talk to people who weren't there, calling for his mother. Other times he would just lie still, breathing hard. Is he going to die like Mama did? Tommy asked quietly. Jack's heart nearly broke. No, son, we're not going to let that happen. But privately, Jack was terrified. He couldn't lose another family member. Not Ben, not his baby boy. Mrs. Carter seemed to understand Jack's fear without him saying anything. She stayed with Ben even when Jack had to check on the cattle. She sang soft songs to the little boy and told him stories to try to keep him calm. On the third night, Ben's fever finally broke. His breathing became easier and his skin felt cooler. When he opened his eyes and asked for water in his normal voice, both Jack and Mrs. Carter nearly cried with relief. I was having scary dreams, Ben said weakly. But I heard you singing. Mrs. Carter, it made me feel better. Mrs. Carter smoothed his hair back from his forehead. You're going to be fine now, little one. You just need to rest and get strong again. As Ben slowly recovered, Jack realized something had changed between him and Mrs. Carter. Working together to save his son had created a bond between them. They had shared fear, worry, and relief. They had trusted each other completely during the crisis. Mrs. Carter seemed different too. She was gentler with all the children, but especially with Ben. She would check on him several times a day, bringing him soup or just sitting with him while he rested. She was really scared, Lucy told her father one evening. I saw her crying when she thought nobody was looking. Jack was surprised. Mrs. Carter had always seemed so strong and controlled. The idea that she had been crying over Ben showed just how much she had come to care about them. The cattle situation was slowly improving, too. With constant care, most of the sick animals recovered. A few were lost, which hurt Mrs. Carter financially. But it could have been much worse. As December continued, the family learned to work together in new ways. The crisis had shown them they could depend on each other. When problems came up, they faced them as a team. Mrs. Carter began asking Jack's opinion about ranch decisions. She trusted his judgment now in a way she hadn't before. Jack, meanwhile, had seen Mrs. Carter's caring side and knew she wasn't just a tough boss anymore. She was someone who genuinely cared about his family. The children had grown closer to Mrs. Carter, too. Lucy often sat with her in the evenings, reading or practicing piano. Tommy would tell her about the animals and ask her questions about ranch life. Ben had taken to following her around like a shadow, chattering about his latest discoveries. One snowy evening, as they all sat around the fireplace in the main house, Ben climbed onto Mrs. Carter's lap. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, and put her arms around him. Double quotes, Mrs. Carter, Ben said sleepily. Do you think my mama can see me from heaven? Mrs. Carter was quiet for a moment. I think she can, Ben, and I think she's proud of what a brave little boy you are. I hope she likes you, Ben said, because I do. Jack watched Mrs. Carter's face soften completely. For just a moment, she looked like she might cry again. Instead, she hugged Ben a little tighter. I like you too, little one, she whispered. The winter continued to be harsh, but somehow it didn't seem as frightening anymore. They had faced serious challenges together and come through them. The frozen pipes, sick cattle, and Ben's illness had tested them all, but it had also brought them closer together. Jack still worried about the future. He still wondered if Mrs. Carter would want them to stay permanently. But the way she had cared for Ben during his illness, the way she included them all in evening activities, the way she asked for Jack's help with important decisions, it all gave him hope. Maybe they weren't just workers anymore. Maybe they were becoming something more like a family. As Christmas approached, Jack could see changes in everyone. Mrs. Carter smiled more often. The children seemed more secure and confident. Even the ranch itself felt different, warmer somehow. Despite the cold weather, they had survived their first real crisis together. Whatever came next, Jack felt they could handle it. They had proven they could take care of each other when times got tough. That was worth more than all the money in the world. Spring came slowly to Sunset Ranch, bringing with it new hopes and unexpected dangers. The snow melted, revealing green grass underneath, and the cattle began to look healthier as they grazed on fresh feed. Jack felt optimistic as he worked on repairs around the ranch. The hard winter was behind them, and everyone had grown closer because of it, but their peaceful life was about to be threatened by forces beyond their control. It started with visits from strangers. The first man arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding up to the house in a fancy carriage pulled by 2 black horses. He wore an expensive suit and carried a briefcase that looked like it cost more money than Jack had ever seen. Jack was mending a fence near the house when he heard voices from the front porch. The stranger was talking to Mrs. Carter, but his tone didn't sound friendly. Mrs. Carter, I represent Mr. Robert Stone of Stone Enterprises. He's made you a very generous offer for this property. Much more than it's actually worth, if I'm being honest. And I've told you before, Mr. Wallace, that the ranch is not for sale, Mrs. Carter replied firmly. But surely you can see the wisdom in accepting. A woman alone, trying to run a cattle ranch? It's not practical. Mr. Stone could put this land to much better use. Jack felt his hands clench around the fence post he was holding. He didn't like the way this man was talking to Mrs. Carter. I've been running this ranch just fine for 3 years, Mrs. Carter said. I don't need Mr. Stone's help or his money. The man sighed dramatically. Mrs. Carter, be reasonable. The offer won't stay on the table forever. And running a ranch is dangerous work. Accidents happen all the time. Something about the way he said accidents made Jack's skin crawl. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a threat. After the man left, Mrs. Carter seemed upset. She worked harder than usual that day, her jaw set in a determined line. When Jack asked if everything was all right, she just said it was business and changed the subject, but the visits continued. Sometimes it was Mr. Wallace again, sometimes it was other men in fancy clothes. They always had the same message. Mr. Stone wanted to buy the ranch and Mrs. Carter should accept his offer. Jack began to notice other troubling things. Cattle that should have been in the north pasture were found wandering near the road. Fence posts that he had just repaired were mysteriously broken again. Gates that were closed at night were found open in the morning. Something's not right. Jack told Mrs. Carter one evening after finding 10 head of cattle had wandered onto the neighbor's property. These animals didn't just wander off on their own. Mrs. Carter nodded grimly. I know, someone's been causing problems on purpose. Why would anyone do that? To make it look like I can't handle the ranch. To make me think I should sell. Jack felt anger rising in his chest. That's not right. We work hard to keep this place running. Some people don't care about right and wrong, Mrs. Carter said. They only care about getting what they want. The problems got worse. Someone cut the fence wire in several places, allowing cattle to escape. The water trough in the east pasture was found with holes punched in it. Tools went missing from the barn. Jack started staying up late, watching for whoever was causing the trouble. He hid near different parts of the ranch each night, but the vandals seemed to know he was there. They always struck somewhere else. The stress was affecting everyone. Mrs. Carter was constantly worried about the next problem. The children could sense the tension and were more quiet than usual. Even little Ben seemed to understand that something was wrong. One morning, Jack made a disturbing discovery. Several of the best breeding cattle were missing entirely. These weren't animals that had wandered off? They had been stolen? That's it, Mrs. Carter said when Jack told her. I'm going to town to talk to the sheriff. But when she returned from town that afternoon, her face was grim. What did the sheriff say? Jack asked. Sheriff Williams said there's no proof of any crime. Missing cattle could have wandered off. Broken fences could be from animals pushing against them. He said unless I catch someone in the act, there's nothing he can do. Jack suspected the sheriff might be getting paid to look the other way, but he didn't say so. Instead, he made a decision. I'm going to catch them, he said. Whatever it takes. That night, instead of watching just one area, Jack positioned himself where he could see the most valuable cattle. He brought his rifle and settled in for a long wait. Around midnight, he heard the sound of horses approaching. 3 men rode quietly toward the cattle pen. They moved like they knew exactly what they were doing. Jack watched as they opened the gate and began to drive the cattle out. This was it, proof that someone was stealing from Mrs. Carter, but as Jack prepared to confront them, he realized he was outnumbered. 3 against 1 wasn't good odds, especially in the dark. If something happened to him, who would protect his children? Instead, Jack followed the thieves at a distance. He watched them drive the cattle toward the Stone property line. When they reached a hidden canyon on Stone's land, Jack saw several other stolen cattle already there. Now he had proof. But he also understood how dangerous this situation really was. Mr. Stone wasn't just trying to buy the ranch, he was actively trying to destroy it. And he had men working for him who weren't afraid to break the law. The next morning, Jack told Mrs. Carter what he had seen. We need to be very careful, he said. These men are serious. They won't stop just because we ask them to. Mrs. Carter's face was pale but determined. This ranch has been in my family for 20 years. I won't let some greedy businessman steal it from me. What if we can't stop them? What if they get violent? Mrs. Carter looked toward the cabin where Jack's children were getting ready for the day. Lucy was helping Ben get dressed while Tommy fed the chickens. Then we'll have to make some hard choices, she said quietly. That afternoon, Mr. Wallace visited again. This time his tone was different, less polite, more threatening. Mrs. Carter, I'm afraid Mr. Stone is losing patience. He's given you every opportunity to sell at a fair price. If you continue to refuse, well... Poku shrugged. Business can be unpredictable. Accidents happen. People get hurt. Jack stepped out of the barn where he had been listening. I think you've said enough, mister. Mr. Wallace looked Jack up and down with disgust. And who might you be? Someone who doesn't like seeing decent people threatened? I'm not threatening anyone, Mr. Wallace said with a cold smile. I'm simply pointing out the risks of ranch life. Fires, stampedes, accidents with equipment, so many ways a person could get hurt. After he left, Mrs. Carter sat down heavily on the porch steps. Jack, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Yes, ma'am? If things get dangerous here, I want you to take the children and leave. Go somewhere safe. Jack felt like she had punched him in the stomach. "Mrs. Carter, we're not going anywhere. These men might hurt the children to get to me. I couldn't live with myself if something happened to Lucy or Tommy or Ben because of my stubbornness. And I couldn't live with myself if I ran away when you needed help," Jack replied firmly. "We're in this together now." Mrs. Carter looked at him for a long moment. "You realize what that means? If you stay, you're choosing to fight." Jack thought about his children playing safely in the yard. He thought about how Mrs. Carter had cared for Ben when he was sick. He thought about the way this place had become home for all of them. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I reckon I am choosing to fight." That night, Jack lay awake thinking about the choice he had made. He was risking everything, his children's safety, their new home, their future. But some things were worth fighting for. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Somewhere in the darkness, dangerous men were planning their next move. Jack gripped his rifle a little tighter and made a promise to himself. Whatever came next, he would protect his family and the woman who had given them a second chance, Mr. Stone, and his men would learn that the people of Sunset Ranch weren't as helpless as they looked. The attack came on a moonless night in late May. Jack was making his usual rounds when he heard the thundering sound of hoofbeats in the distance. His blood turned cold as he realized what was happening. Someone was driving the entire herd of cattle straight toward the ranch house where his children were sleeping. A cattle stampede was one of the most dangerous things that could happen on a ranch. Hundreds of frightened animals running at full speed could destroy everything in their path, including buildings and people. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate attempt to destroy everything Mrs. Carter had worked for. Jack ran toward the house, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Stampede! Everyone get up, get to safety." Mrs. Carter burst out of the main house, still in her nightgown but carrying a rifle. "How many? Looks like the whole herd." "They're coming from the north." "Pasture!" The sound was getting louder now, like thunder that wouldn't stop. Through the darkness, Jack could see the mass of cattle charging toward them. Behind the herd, he spotted 3 riders pushing the animals forward with whips and shouts. "The children!" Mrs. Carter shouted. Jack was already running toward the cabin. He burst through the door to find Lucy sitting up in bed, her eyes wide with fear. Tommy and Ben were still asleep, but the noise was getting louder. "Lucy, get your brothers up right now. We have to get to the root cellar." Lucy didn't ask questions. She shook Tommy awake while Jack picked up Ben, who was confused and crying. "Papa, what's happening?" Tommy asked, rubbing his eyes. "Dangerous animals are coming. We have to hide until it's safe." Mrs. Carter met them outside, pointing toward a small wooden door in the ground near the house. "The root cellar! It's the safest place." Jack had never been in the root cellar before, but Mrs. Carter quickly opened the heavy door. Steps led down into a small underground room where vegetables and canned goods were stored. It would protect them from the stampede, but it was cramped and dark. "I'm scared," Ben whimpered, clinging to Jack's shirt. "I know, buddy, but we're going to be safe down here." Lucy held Tommy's hand as they descended into the cellar. Mrs. Carter came last, closing the door just as the first cattle reached the yard above them. The sound was incredible. Hundreds of hooves pounded over their heads, shaking dirt from the cellar ceiling. The children huddled together while Jack and Mrs. Carter listened to the destruction happening above. "They're destroying everything," Mrs. Carter said, her voice tight with anger and grief. Through the chaos, they could hear men shouting and laughing. The riders were enjoying the destruction they were causing. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the sound began to fade. The cattle had passed through, leaving who knew how much damage behind. "Are they gone?" Lucy whispered. Mrs. Carter cracked open the cellar door and listened carefully. The night was quiet again, except for the distant sound of cattle settling down somewhere far from the ranch buildings. "I think so, but we need to be careful." They climbed out of the cellar to survey the damage. Even in the darkness, they could see it was bad. The fence around the house had been completely destroyed. The vegetable garden was trampled flat. The chicken coop was smashed to pieces, but the house and barn were still standing. The cattle had missed the buildings by just a few yards. They knew exactly what they were doing, Mrs. Carter said grimly. This was planned to scare us, not kill us. If they had wanted the buildings destroyed, they would have driven the herd differently. Jack understood. This was a message from Mr. Stone. See how easily I can destroy everything you have. Sell to me now, or next time will be worse. What do we do now? Lucy asked. She was trying to be brave, but Jack could see she was shaken. Now we clean up and rebuild, Mrs. Carter said firmly. We don't let bullies win. As the sun rose, the full extent of the damage became clear. The stampede had destroyed most of the fencing, scattered equipment everywhere, and killed or injured some of the chickens. But surprisingly, the main buildings were intact. Jack spent the morning rounding up cattle. Many of them were scattered across several miles, but most seemed unharmed. The animals were nervous and jumpy, but they gradually calmed down as Jack and Mrs. Carter moved them back to secure pastures. Tommy showed his skill with animals by helping calm the most frightened cattle. His gentle voice and patient approach worked even when the animals wouldn't respond to adults. You're getting really good at this, Mrs. Carter told him as they watched a nervous cow finally relax under Tommy's care. Animals are just scared sometimes, Tommy said seriously. When I'm scared, I want someone to talk nice to me, so that's what I do for them. Even little Ben helped by collecting scattered tools and equipment. He made a game of it, pretending he was hunting for treasure. His cheerful attitude helped keep everyone's spirits up during the difficult cleanup. Lucy took charge of checking on the surviving chickens and making sure they had food and water. She worked quietly but efficiently, showing the same determination. As Mrs. Carter. By afternoon, they had made significant progress. But Jack knew this wasn't over. The men who had caused the stampede would try something else. He was right. That evening, as they sat down to a simple dinner, they heard horses approaching again. This time, it was Mr. Stone himself, along with 4 armed men. Mrs. Carter. Stone called from the yard. I heard you had some trouble last night. Terrible thing, cattle stampedes, so unpredictable. Mrs. Carter stepped onto the porch, Jack beside her. What do you want, Stone? Just came to renew my offer. After last night's unfortunate incident, I imagine you're reconsidering the wisdom of trying to run this place alone. I'm not alone, Mrs. Carter said firmly. Stone looked at Jack dismissively. 1 hired hand and 3 children? That's not much protection against the dangers of ranch life. It's enough, Jack said. Stone's men shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. The threat was clear without words. Papa, Ben's voice came from the doorway. He had been listening despite being told to stay inside. Why are these men being mean to Mrs. Carter? Stone looked at the little boy with cold eyes. Because some people don't know what's good for them, son. That was the wrong thing to say. Jack stepped forward, his hand moving to his own rifle. Don't you talk to my boy? Easy there, Miller, Stone said with a nasty smile. Wouldn't want anyone to get hurt, especially not the children. Mrs. Carter moved protectively in front of the doorway where Ben stood. You've made your offer, Stone. I've refused it. Now? Get off my property. This doesn't have to be unpleasant, Mrs. Carter, but I always get what I want. Always. And I want this land. Then you're going to be disappointed, Mrs. Carter replied. Stone stared at her for a long moment, then turned his horse around. We'll see about that. After they rode away, Mrs. Carter and Jack stood in silence for several minutes. He's not going to stop, Jack said finally. I know. The children. I know, Mrs. Carter repeated. Jack, I meant what I said before. If you want to take them somewhere safe, I'll understand. Jack looked through the doorway at his 3 children. Lucy was comforting Ben, who was upset by the confrontation. Tommy was petting one of the barn cats, trying to stay calm. These children had already lost their mother and their first home. Now they had found safety and happiness here. They had Mrs. Carter, who cared for them like family. They had purpose. And belonging. Double quotes, Mrs. Carter, Jack said slowly. These kids have been through enough running. If we leave now, they'll never feel safe anywhere. They'll always be looking over their shoulders, wondering when the next threat will come. So what are you saying? I'm saying we make our stand here, together. We show my children that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. Mrs. Carter looked at him with something that might have been admiration. It's going to be dangerous, yes, ma'am. But some things are worth the risk. That night they began planning their defense. They had to protect the ranch, the cattle, and most importantly, the children. Stone had made it clear he would use any means necessary to get what he wanted. But he had underestimated them. Mrs. Carter wasn't just a woman trying to run a ranch alone anymore. Jack wasn't just a desperate man looking for work. They were, family now, and they would fight like one. Whatever Stone tried next, they would be ready. 3 days after Stone's visit, Jack was working on rebuilding the damaged fence when a lone rider approached the ranch. This time it wasn't one of Stone's usual men. It was someone Jack had never seen before, a well-dressed stranger who looked like he might be from back east. The man dismounted near where Jack was working and walked over with a friendly smile. "You must be Jack Miller. I've heard about you." Jack straightened up, suspicious. "Who's asking?" "Name's William Hayes. I work for Mr. Stone, but I'm not like his other employees. I'm what you might call a problem solver." "What kind of problems?" Hayes looked around the ranch, taking in the damaged fencing and scattered equipment. "The kind where everyone gets what they want without anyone getting hurt?" Jack didn't like where this was heading. "I'm listening." "Mr. Stone has a proposition for you, Jack. May I call you Jack?" Hayes didn't wait for an answer. "He's prepared to offer you a position as foreman on his main ranch. It's a big operation, 5 times the size of this place. Good pay, nice house for you and your children, steady work. And all I have to do is abandon Mrs. Carter? Now. Nobody's abandoning anyone. Mrs. Carter is a stubborn woman who's in over her head. You're a practical man with children to think about. Mr. Stone is simply offering you a better opportunity." Jack set down his tools and looked Hayes in the eye. "And if I say no?" Hayes's friendly smile faltered slightly. "Well, Jack, that would be unfortunate. You see, Mr. Stone has been very patient with Mrs. Carter, but his patience is running out. Things are going to get unpleasant ... around here." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. Accidents happen on ranches. Equipment fails. Buildings catch fire. People get hurt." Hayes shrugged as if these were natural disasters instead of deliberate attacks. "But none of that has to affect you and your children. Take the job, Jack. Give your kids a secure future." Jack felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. "I need time to think about it, of course. But don't take too long. Mr. Stone expects an answer by tomorrow evening." After Hayes rode away, Jack stood alone by the fence, his mind racing. The offer was tempting in some ways. Stone's ranch would mean steady work, good pay, and safety for his children. No more worrying about stampedes or sabotage. No more living with the constant threat of violence, but it would also mean betraying Mrs. Carter when she needed him most. It would mean teaching his children that loyalty could be bought, that running away was acceptable when things got tough. Jack didn't mention Hayes's visit to Mrs. Carter right away. He spent the rest of the day working and thinking, trying to figure out what was best for his family. That evening, while the children were playing in the yard, Mrs. Carter approached him. "Jack, you've been quiet today. Is something wrong?" Jack realized he couldn't keep the offer secret. Mrs. Carter deserved to know what they were facing. He told her about Hayes's visit and Stone's proposition. Mrs. Carter listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious with each word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "It's a good offer," she said, finally, double quotes Mrs. Carter, ... "No, Jack, it is a good offer. Steady work, good pay, safety for your children. Any reasonable man would take it. Are you telling me to go?" Mrs. Carter looked toward the house where the children's laughter could be heard through the windows. Lucy was helping Ben with a puzzle while Tommy read aloud from one of the library books. "I'm telling you that I would understand if you did. I knew this might happen when I let you stay. I knew Stone might try to use you against me. And what will you do if I leave?" "Keep fighting. Find another way. This ranch is my home, Jack. I won't give it up without a fight, even if I have to fight alone." Jack studied her face. Mrs. Carter was trying to be strong, but he could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she couldn't hold out against Stone by herself. Without Jack's help, she would eventually lose everything. What if I stay and something happens to the children? Then I'll never forgive myself, Mrs. Carter said quietly. Jack, your first responsibility is to your children. I've grown to love them like they were my own, but they're not my own. They're yours, and you have to do what's best for them. That night, Jack lay awake thinking about the choice he had to make. Through the thin cabin walls, he could hear his children sleeping peacefully. They felt safe here. They had found happiness and purpose at Sunset Ranch, but they had been through so much already. They had lost their mother, their home, their entire way of life. Was it fair to ask them to face danger again? Around midnight, Jack heard a soft knock at the cabin door. When he opened it, he found Lucy standing there in her nightgown. Papa, I couldn't sleep. What's wrong, sweetheart? I heard you and Mrs. Carter talking earlier. Are we going to leave? Jack sighed. He should have known Lucy would figure out what was happening. She was too smart to miss the tension around the ranch. I don't know yet, honey. There are some men who want Mrs. Carter to sell the ranch. They might try to hurt us if we stay. Lucy looked up at him with serious eyes. Papa, do you remember what Mama used to say about doing the right thing? Jack felt his throat tighten. She said doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Mrs. Carter needs us, Papa. She took care of us when we had nowhere to go. She taught me to play piano. She read stories to Ben when he was sick. She's like family now. I know, sweetheart, but I have to keep you and your brother safe. We'll be safe together, Lucy said with the simple confidence of childhood. All of us together. The next morning brought another problem. Jack discovered that someone had poisoned the water in the main cattle trough. 20 head of cattle were sick and 2 had already died. It was clearly another attack from Stone's men. As Jack and Mrs. Carter worked to save the poisoned cattle, Jack found himself watching her with new respect. She never gave up, never complained, never showed fear in front of the children. She just kept fighting. Around noon, Tommy made a discovery that changed everything. While helping to move the sick cattle, he noticed something unusual. Papa, look at this, he called, pointing to the ground near the poisoned trough. Jack came over to see what Tommy had found. There in the mud was a clear boot print, and beside it, something that made Jack's blood run cold, a piece of paper that had fallen. From someone's pocket, the paper was a note written in Stone's handwriting. If the cattle don't convince her, hurt the children. Jack stared at the note, his hands shaking with rage. Stone wasn't just threatening the ranch anymore. He was threatening Jack's babies. Mrs. Carter read the note over Jack's shoulder. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. That settles it, she said. Jack, take the children and go, tonight. Don't wait for Hayes to come back. But Jack was thinking about what Lucy had said, about doing the right thing, about staying together as a family. He looked at Mrs. Carter, who had risked everything to help his family when they had nothing. He thought about his children, who had found love and security here. He thought about his wife, who had always stood up for what was right. No, Jack said firmly. Jack. No, Mrs. Carter, we're not running. We're staying and we're fighting. All of us together. When Hayes arrived that evening for Jack's answer, he found the whole family waiting for him on the front porch. Jack stood with his rifle in his hands. Mrs. Carter stood beside him. Even the children were there, showing they weren't afraid. Well, Jack, Hayes asked, what's your decision? Jack looked at the man who represented everything ugly about greed and power. Then he looked at his family, both the children he had been born to and the woman who had chosen to love them. My decision is that you and Stone can go straight to hell, Jack said clearly. We're staying right here. Hayes's friendly mask finally slipped away completely. You're making a big mistake, Miller, a big mistake. Maybe, but it's our mistake to make. After Hayes rode away, Mrs. Carter turned to Jack. Are you sure about this? Jack looked down at Ben, who was holding his hand trustingly. At Tommy, who stood straight and brave despite being only 6 years old. At Lucy, who had reminded him what his wife would have wanted him to do. I'm sure, Jack said. We're family now. And families stick together. The battle for Sunset Ranch was about to begin in earnest. But whatever came next, they would face it together. The final confrontation came sooner than expected. 2 days after Jack refused Stone's offer, little Ben made a discovery that would change everything. He was playing near the old oak tree behind the house when he found something unusual. Ben had always been good at finding treasures, but this was different. Hidden in a hollow at the base of the tree was a metal box wrapped in old cloth. "Papa! Mrs. Carter! Come see what I found." Ben called excitedly. Jack and Mrs. Carter hurried over to where Ben was jumping up and down with excitement. The box was heavy and looked very old. "What do you think it is?" Ben asked. Mrs. Carter's face went pale as she recognized the box. "This belonged to my husband. I thought it was lost when he died." With shaking hands, she opened the box. Inside were papers, official-looking documents with seals and stamps. Mrs. Carter's eyes grew wide as she read them. "Jack," she whispered, "these are the original land deeds. They show that I own not just this ranch, but the water rights to the entire valley, including the land Stone's been claiming as his own." Jack understood immediately. Water rights were everything in cattle country. Whoever controlled the water controlled all the land around it. If Mrs. Carter legally owned the water rights, Stone's empire was built on stolen land. "He's been stealing water for years," Mrs. Carter continued, reading through the documents. "These papers prove it. With these I can have him arrested." But their celebration was cut short by the sound of approaching horses. Through the trees, they could see Stone riding toward the house with at least a dozen armed men. "He's not here to talk this time," Jack said grimly. "Get the children inside, now." Mrs. Carter scooped up the precious documents while Jack gathered the children. They had planned for this possibility and knew exactly what to do. "Lucy, take your brothers to the root cellar and stay there no matter what happens," Jack instructed. "Don't come out until Mrs. Carter or I come to get you." "Papa, I'm scared," Tommy said. "I know, son. But remember what we talked about. Sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared." Lucy took charge of her brothers, leading them quickly to the hidden cellar. Jack was proud of how calm and responsible she remained even in this frightening moment. Stone and his men surrounded the house. Stone himself rode up to the front porch, his face twisted with anger. "Miller! Carter! Come out here!" Jack and Mrs. Carter stepped onto the porch together. Jack held his rifle ready while Mrs. Carter kept the precious documents hidden behind her back. "Time's up," Stone announced. "I'm done playing games. You're going to sign over this ranch right now, or my men are going to burn it down with you." Inside, "We're not signing anything," Mrs. Carter said firmly. Stone laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Look around, lady. You're outnumbered 12-2. You really think you can stop us?" "Maybe not," Jack said. "But we're not going down without a fight." Stone was about to give his men the order to attack when another sound filled the air. More horses approaching. But from a different direction. Everyone turned to see Sheriff Williams riding up the road with a group of men wearing badges. Behind them came several townspeople that Jack recognized from his trips to buy supplies. Stone's face went from confident to worried in an instant. "Sheriff, what are you doing here?" Sheriff Williams dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his gun. "Got some interesting information today, Stone, about water rights and stolen land." Mrs. Carter stepped forward, holding up the documents Ben had found. "Sheriff, these papers prove that my family has owned the water rights to this entire valley. For 20 years, Mr. Stone has been stealing water and claiming land that doesn't belong to him." The sheriff took the documents and examined them carefully. His face grew more serious as he read. "These look legitimate," he said finally. "Stone, you're under arrest for theft of water rights, cattle rustling, and destruction of property." "You can't prove any of that," Stone sputtered. "Actually, I can," came a voice from behind the sheriff's group. Everyone turned to see Hayes riding up, but this time he wasn't working for Stone. "My name is William Hayes, and I'm an investigator for the territorial government," he announced. "I've been gathering evidence against Stone for months. He's been stealing water, intimidating honest ranchers, and bribing local officials. Jack stared in amazement. Hayes had been working against Stone all along, not for him. The offer I made you the other day was a test, Hayes explained to Jack. We needed to know if you could be bought. When you refused, we knew you were honest people worth protecting. Stone's men looked around nervously. Faced with real law enforcement officers, they weren't so eager to fight anymore. Several of them quietly rode away, abandoning Stone to face the consequences alone. This isn't over. Stone shouted as the sheriff put him in chains. I'll be back. No, you won't, Sheriff Williams said. You're going to prison for a long time. As Stone was led away, the crowd of townspeople came forward to congratulate Mrs. Carter and Jack. Apparently, Stone had been threatening other small ranchers too, and everyone was relieved to see him finally stopped. Mrs. Carter, one of the townspeople said, we want you to know that we're sorry we didn't help sooner. Stone had us all scared. We understand, Mrs. Carter replied. The important thing is that it's over now. After everyone left, Jack went to get the children from the root cellar. They emerged blinking in the sunlight, confused by all the commotion. Is it over, Papa? Ben asked. Yes, buddy. The bad men are gone. We're safe now. That evening, the family sat together on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The children were finally relaxed, laughing and playing like normal children should. Mrs. Carter, Lucy said suddenly, now that we're safe, are we going to stay here forever? Mrs. Carter looked at Jack, then at the three children who had become so important to her. Well, she said slowly, this ranch is too big for one person to run alone, and I've gotten used to having family around. So if you want to stay forever, I'd like that very much. Ben jumped up excitedly. Really? Forever. And ever? Forever and ever, Mrs. Carter confirmed. Jack felt a warmth spread through his chest. They had come here desperate and broken, just looking for work and shelter. They had found so much more. There's just one thing, Mrs. Carter continued. Jack, I want to make you a full partner in this ranch. You've earned it. Jack started to protest, but Mrs. Carter held up her hand. And I want to adopt the children legally. That way, if anything ever happens to you or me, they'll always have a home here. Lucy ran to Mrs. Carter and hugged her tightly. Does that mean you'll really be our mother? Mrs. Carter's eyes filled with tears. If you want me to be, we do, all three children said together later that night. After the children were asleep, Jack and Mrs. Carter sat by the fireplace talking about the future. The ranch could be expanded now that they had clear ownership of the water rights. There was talk of starting a small school for the local children, with Lucy helping to teach the younger ones. Jack, Mrs. Carter said quietly, when you first came here, you asked me to let you work the land and promise to guard your little ones. I remember. I want you to know that I didn't just guard them. They changed my life. They brought joy back into this house. They made me remember what it felt like to be part of a family. Jack nodded, understanding completely. They changed my life too, and so did you. You gave us more than shelter and work. You gave us hope. As winter approached again, the ranch was thriving. Jack had become an equal partner, managing the cattle operation while Mrs. Carter handled the business side. The children were growing and learning, each finding their own special talents. Lucy had become an excellent reader and was helping to teach other children in the area. Tommy's gift with animals had grown stronger, and he was already talking about becoming a veterinarian someday. Ben continued to find joy in simple things, bringing laughter and light to everyone around him. The adoption papers were finalized. Just before Christmas, Mrs. Carter officially became Helen Miller, and the children became Millers too. They were a real family now, not just in their hearts, but in the eyes of the law. On Christmas morning, they gathered around a tree that Jack and Tommy had cut from their own land. There were simple presents: books for Lucy, a wooden horse for Ben, a real saddle for Tommy, but the best present was being together. Papa, Ben said as he played with his wooden horse, remember when we didn't have anywhere to live? I remember, buddy.